Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab is holding talks in Qatar about safely evacuating both British nationals and Afghan interpreters from Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. Let's talk to the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, representing the government for us this morning. Very good morning to you, Mr Williamson.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, what on earth can we do for people like Saeed?
Well, I'd obviously just heard the case on the programme today, and, you know, I saw when I was privileged to be Defence Secretary out in Afghanistan the amazing work that people such as Saeed and so many others did for British forces and the British government. You know, this is why the Foreign Secretary has flown out to Qatar today to start discussions and negotiations about how we can do everything possible to, you know, not just Saeed, but other people who've been involved in efforts to make sure that they have safe passage out of Afghanistan.
How do we secure that, Mr Williamson? Because Saeed told us he cannot stay in the same place. The Taliban, for all their assurances, for their expressed policy of amnesty for those who worked with us over the past 2 decades, the Taliban is going door to door, knocking on people's doors. They have information about who they consider collaborators, and that means death. And, you know, you are talking as if there is a negotiation going on. We are going to be discussing the process. This guy needs help. He needs help right now.
And that's why the Foreign Secretary is going out there. He's doing everything he can do to make sure that there is safe passage, and that is done quickly and that is done swiftly. We understand the urgency. That is why you saw such a resource put into Kabul airport, whether it was 16 Air Assault Brigade, who did an amazing job, whereas the Royal Air Force, the combined armed forces, doing everything they could.
Mr Williamson, they've gone. We have left these people behind. And you're talking about safe passage. You know, we were in the position where we could not tell this poor man what he was supposed to do. We looked back at the information that your colleague, Victoria Atkins, had given us on the programme yesterday, and we couldn't find any information there about what he's supposed to do. If you're saying safe passage, does that suggest that people like Saeed are supposed to register with the Taliban, the people that they're scared of, and say, I'm someone who worked with Western forces, give me safe passage out of the country? Because we don't have troops there to ensure that's going to happen.
So we're working, you know, it's not just Britain, but there's other countries around the globe working together to make sure that there is that safe passage, so that actually his safety and his family's safety is secure. And of course,
you've been Defence Secretary. I think one of the things that we're all concerned about is the timing of this. Would you expect this to happen in the next couple of days? He would get that information in the next few days. Will it be a week? Will it be 2 weeks? Because right now he is living minute to minute as to whether he's going to stay alive or not. So what is the time frame for this?
And this is why Dominic has flown out today. This is why he understands and appreciates the urgency of this. This is why he's actually doing everything he can do.
So would you expect it to be a couple of days, or would you expect it to be a week or a month?
So you've already seen action in the United Nations in terms of the messages that they're sending out to the Taliban. And I certainly hope that we'll see action imminently, will get agreement swiftly, and that's something that the Foreign Secretary
or is that
working
weeks?
to over
Imminent
days,
and swiftly, is it days or weeks? Okay. So days, not weeks.
Yeah, that's certainly what the Foreign Secretary and the whole team is working towards, to make sure this is something we can do very, very quickly, not something that is going to take a long time. So very much about days, certainly not looking at trying to have this in a weeks category.
Are we supposed to trust the Taliban?
What we are focused on doing is just getting every person that we can out of Afghanistan that did so much for our country. That's the right thing to do. The Taliban are in control of Afghanistan. That's who we're having to deal with at present. But our focus is in terms of delivering for those people who've done so much. We've already been incredibly successful. You know, 15,000 people have been airlifted, and that's down to the amazing work of not just the armed forces, but the border force and the Foreign Office working with our
tribute to those who enabled those to get out. We're concerned right now about those we've left behind. There is a massive issue of trust here in our government. You know, our trust in the Foreign Secretary and why he was on holiday as Afghanistan fell. Our trust in the Prime Minister and the way that he has handled these huge issues that he has on his plate. Trust in you as well as Education Secretary. And schools are going back. And I'm not sure that parents or teachers fully trust the measures that you have in place to make sure there's not a massive spike in infections when our children go back into classrooms. If I send my child back into school, what mitigations are there?
So first of all, I'm sure you'd want to join me in wishing children well. You know, those children who are going to school for the first time, those who are going to a new school and those who are moving up a year. There's that sort of sense of excitement, but also nervousness, and we want them to have a really enjoyable, happy experience back in school. And we're always looking at how do we strike that sort of sensible balance between making sure children's education is as normal as it was pre-pandemic, while still continuing to deal with a global pandemic and COVID. And it's right that we prioritise children. I mean, you know, you, like so many, and myself over the summer have been able to enjoy so many freedoms, whether it's been going to the pub, music festival, sporting events. But now is the time to let schools get back to as much normality as possible.
Schools to go back, and we want the kids to have the best experience they can possibly have. But what plans are in place when those figures inevitably spike, which we have seen happening in Scotland, because they've gone back a few weeks before, the schools here in England and Wales and Northern Ireland, and undoubtedly that's going to happen when the kids start mixing again. What plans are in place to protect the children and to enable them to stay in the classroom? Because when you look at the league table of lost days of education, we are second only to Italy in terms of how much education our children have missed over the course of the pandemic.
So firstly, on those statistics, they're UK-wide statistics, and as you all know, English schools have been actually having pupils in a lot more than Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish schools. But what we're doing in terms of precautions, of course, the reason that we're rolling out one of the largest testing programmes in schools once again is because we recognise that actually testing for pupils and staff as they come back to school in secondary schools and, of course, primary school staff as well. We recognise this is a very good way of catching COVID before it enters school. We've also got a whole series of protections that where schools and public health bodies, local public health bodies working together can introduce additional measures. But what we're really focusing on is making sure children maximise the amount of time that they have in the classroom. That's why we've changed the isolation rules, so children are in line with those adults who've been double jabbed, so that if they've been in close contact with someone, they don't have to isolate. They'll be contacted by Test and Trace, they'll be advised to get a PCR test, but most importantly, they're going to be able to continue to go into school, have their lessons and benefit from education.
All right, unfortunately, I think that we can all anticipate that there will be a rise in infections. Air filtration would be a good idea. I don't know whether you're going to consider bringing back masks, but we'll wait and see. Gavin Williamson, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.